All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our special event today. Actually, we're very honored today to have the mayor of Fremont, Lily May, with us today. And it's be nice if we can hopefully make this an annual event. I want to thank Ben Yee for setting this up for us today to have the state of the city from Mayor Lily Lee, or Lily May, so that we can all be informed on what's happening in our community here. And this applies to anybody who's doing business in Fremont. So you don't necessarily have to be living in Fremont. You're doing business here. So all of our offices, this impacts all of you guys. So I'm glad to see a lot of agents from all the different offices on today, because many of us are doing business inside of Fremont. So without further ado, I don't want to take up any more time. I'd like to have Ben do the introduction of Mayor Lily May today for us. But again, thank you, Lily, for taking your time. It's a great honor to have you speak to the office today, and I know it's going to be very enlightening. So Ben, why don't you go ahead and do the introduction?
Yes, I thank you everybody for attending this. Again, I want to introduce our mayor, Lily May of Fremont here, who's going to be going over lots of different things that are happening here in the city that we as realtors need to cue in on and focus on and understand what is happening throughout this great city. People probably don't even realize how large we're, 92 square miles and approaching almost 250,000 people. So with no further ado, let me introduce Mayor May. And Mayor May, why don't you take it away?
Sure. So thank you so much. I'm not sure if that's my echoing here. Is that better?
You're good to go.
Okay. I just don't want to be echoing in the background too. Um, so I just wanted to thank you all for this opportunity to come and share with you about some of the things that are happening in the city of Fremont. As Ben mentioned, I know all of you are probably very much familiar that we're the fourth largest city in the Bay Area. But with the challenges that come with that, this has been a little bit, I would say, akin to baptism by fire hose this last year. And so we've had everything from COVID-19, wildfires, as well as the civil unrest, and also trying to get people back to work healthy. When I think about how some of the areas that are important to us that we need to focus on right now, I think about the physical health, the fiscal health, and the mental health. And when it comes to physical health, I'm very proud to say that while we were the first city to go into lockdown, we were also one of the first cities in the Bay Area to provide testing. And through this time period, we had testing from our fire station at the training facilities. We also had testing through Washington Hospital, Kaiser, Sutter Health, and also with Bay Area Community Health Services Group and Asian Health Services. So we're trying to deliver as much testing as possible. I know that there's a lot of frustration when it comes to this type of period, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way, because in terms of the feeling of not being able to see all of you in person, I'd much rather do this in person. And I'm sure there's a feeling of COVID cooped. And I jokingly tell people that I live in the Brady Bunch world, where we're all living in little boxes of different sizes. And trying to have this interaction makes it tough. But in this time period, we're also very much responsible for helping to facilitate. While we don't make the decisions on the vaccinations, we are trying to facilitate that they are happening, and that ensuring that we are providing processes that allow that. And a good example would be most recently, some of you have read in some of the articles that there's been discussion about reopening of schools, but part of that is making sure that our educators and those who are on the front line are vaccinated. And so I have been fortunate enough to have regular biweekly calls with Supervisor Valle, my fellow mayors in his district, as well as healthcare operators, such as the healthcare networks, which allow us then to have a better understanding during some of the most intense periods of we're worried about providing COVID treatment, to be able to know the inventory in terms of beds available, in terms of ventilators, and how can we facilitate that. So with the educators, we were able to help provide access through Hallers, which is a local community pharmacy, and an outreach with our Fremont Fire Station. So to date, I think we've probably vaccinated over 4,000, not just teachers, but also our clerks and those who are on the front line. I do also follow it very closely in terms of our rates of vaccination and accessibility. And I'm always continually looking at opportunities to provide more resources as they become available. And it's important for us. I look at it having come just a little bit of my background. I'm originally in tech world and in terms of data and as a controller. And so I look at it from some of the more pragmatic side in terms of not only do we need to have people be able to open, but we have to open safely. And some of those other areas that we've provided that you may be familiar with during this time period is we provided a lot of different aid through programs through our city. We strongly believe, and I'm very fortunate that we have an excellent economic development department where we don't just bring businesses to Fremont, we also want to make sure that they're successful and can thrive in Fremont. So during this time period, we've provided in our first tranche of aid through community block development grants federally, we gave 400,000 in renter assistance, 400,000 in small business grants. And those are those that don't have to be paid back in addition to the PPE programs. And then we also worked with our county, and for District 1, we were able to secure 250,000 in grants. And then we worked with East Bay Economic Development as well as with the second tranche of money from the federal dollars and provided in total about over $1 million last year in small business grants. A program that I think that you might be very interested in, I think is important for you to know to share with the community is we have a new program called Keep Fremont Housed. And that launches on April 1st. And I can send the flyer for you. But it's on our website at www.fremont.gov/Keep Fremont Housed. And the program is important because it's providing direct aid to those who are behind, whether they're tenants or landlords in rent, as well as landlords being so that they get paid from their tenants, not landlords for business commercial. So just to clarify, I think some people have asked that question. It's for residential, but not only for that area, but also for back due utilities. And so this is the first time for Fremont, and you may also see another program through Alameda County, and Alameda County is running their own program. But when we looked at aid and how it's coming to our city, most times, and we've talked about Fremont's size and its expanse in terms of 90 some plus square miles, but to let you know that in the past, Fremont usually is lumped with the other cities, and direct aid usually goes only to cities that are larger. So for example, the first round of CARES Act, it only came to cities that were greater than 500,000 in population, which means no city in Alameda County got direct aid, because even Oakland is at 450,000 people. But for this most recent effort for this for funding, we were able to get the federal agreement to look at cities bigger than 200,000, which is great news for Fremont, because this time for this program, Keep Fremont Housed, we are getting direct aid from the federal government, and that's for over $7 million. And so that will help translate into direct assistance to those who need it at this time. And we are also a little unique, and I had a call earlier this week also with some of our other housing networks, so BAN, Bay Area Housing Network, to talk about the fact that unlike some other cities, and it depends on the federal program, they are only providing assistance up to 80%. The dollars that are coming through to Fremont, we decided to allocate it at 100% of the rental assistance that's needed to cover it. So once we go into federal dollars, which we also do have a separate allocation pool, we will then have to go to the 80% because that's in conformance with their guidelines. But when Fremont is given funding directly, we are able then to better define what we think is most needed in our communities. And so it's taken a lot of effort, but I think that it's something that I hope to encourage all of you to join me on. In addition to my role as the mayor, I sit on many other committees, and these help in terms of getting advocacy and awareness for Fremont. I've been actively involved in the League of California Cities, Housing and Economic Development, and I was highlighting that, and I will send you all some of the things that we do. And I think it's important. I had went through a discussion with them last week, and when we talk about Zoom core, I feel like I sometimes live in I'm a little mime living in the Zoom cage. But we had discussions about housing legislation bills, and there's so many in this round that do pertain to housing and residential, and they really dramatically could have an impact on the cost of housing and the quality and characteristics of our neighborhoods. So I would love for you to be engaged in some of those, and I will send the link to some of that information. There are over 130 pages that I didn't think I would want to go through with all of you, but I will highlight some of those bills and send those to you so that you can be aware of them. But some of them pertain to my active discussions with some of my fellow mayors. There is discussion right now, you may have seen in Berkeley and some other areas where they're banning or no longer building single family home construction. And there's also discussion about taking single family homes, allowing people to automatically ministerially at a city level, then just automatically turn it into multi-tenant housing, duplexes or fourplexes. I am opposed to that idea, not in the sense that I don't recognize the need for housing, but I do think that there needs to be some preservation of neighborhood characteristics. And so I was part of the group of mayors or members of the National League of the League of California Cities when we had this discussion that said I would oppose it unless it's amended to include some of those. Because when I think about Fremont, especially being five historic towns coming together to make one city, part of what makes Fremont special, and I think at least for myself and so many others chosen as a home, is the fact that there are areas of town that are different and that you have different characteristics and different charms. And so if you were to go through and just let people randomly turn, single family housing into duplexes or fourplexes, there's an impact on the characteristics of the home. There's an impact on the quality of life. There's an impact on the infrastructure and the demands that are needed to maintain the quality of life, such as our public safety, our schools, our roads, and our parks. And so those are things that therefore I feel like there needs to be a balance to how we address these. One of the other things, as I mentioned earlier just now, is parks. And for me, I think it's important to have access, especially in this COVID time period, to these gems and resources for our community. And I was going to ask if you could pull up, maybe Judy, if you could pull up, there's a summary that we did, and I think it'd be very informative for all of you. This is the first time our city is updating our master park plan in 25 years. And so part of that, we did a study on demographics. And I think that's important for you to note because it was an incredibly detailed study. If you scroll down a little bit, you can see that we looked at the population, the ethnicity, the age, the income. And so this is a very, very detailed report. It's 33 pages, and it goes into the breakdown of our methodology. What are some of the demographic lines that we looked at, some of our service areas, and it also forecasts the future growth. Because as we're trying to look at how we're growing as a city and how we're able to meet those resources, we wanted to plan ahead and not just look at it ideally every 25 years, but on an ongoing, hopefully every 5-year basis. And this will allow us to better expand and build those needs. The other thing that may be of interest is that the income growth, the education, and the population. And I will touch upon that real quickly with some of the population discussion, because the fact that you may be familiar, we have in our city right now, 500 units that are dedicated to senior active living housing. And part of that is actually one of the infrastructure changes that we've put in, which I think is important for you to know or to be able to share if people are interested. We have a brand new senior, or we call it age-friendly center down in Warm Springs. And that will be opening once it's safe to do so with COVID. It was completed during this time period of being sheltered in place. And this is one of many projects. Just to let you know that while you may not see all of us at our offices in person right now, there has been much that's been going on throughout the city. And some of the projects that I'd love to highlight for you are, we have a brand new elementary school, which at the discretion of the school will be open. But that is something that's a real gem, Lila Brinkhurst Elementary, and the park that's associated with that. There is a brand new bike pedestrian bridge, which actually I'm doing the ribbon cutting in next week virtually. And so we were actually completed most of the project by late winter, fall, and fall-winter time period, but we didn't open it. We were waiting for BART to accept it. And they have looked at all the physical features, such as the elevators and the other escalators and the usage. And so we're going to be doing a soft ribbon cutting and virtually in the next week or so. And in addition to that, we also have our downtown event center. And that's something that I'm excited to share, that we're bringing some more restaurants and businesses. And unfortunately, just to answer the secret question, people always ask, do I get to vote on what comes? I don't get to directly choose the restaurants. I wish they asked me what I would like to eat. But they have been wonderful, and I've been very excited to see. We have Nick the Greek, which opened up at what used to be Yala's. And then we also have some of our anchor tenants coming to our locale at State Street. And those are Slice, which is a pizzeria, which will have live music in addition to adult beverages. And then also Raw ASF, which will have more acai bowls and vegetarian, vegan types of options. But I'm always looking for more ideas and suggestions. Um, Again, like I said, it'd be for opportunities for us to reach out to businesses and then to hopefully encourage them to expand. Um, Other questions that you may have during this time period is that when we're looking at projects, it has been a challenge at times that, much like any other business, some of our developers are also going through some struggles. Some of the most recent projects that you may have heard of and that have been at the forefront of some people's radar include some of those that were being managed by Silicon Sage. And unfortunately, we've had a bad string of luck with that, in the sense that both they and also the one at Sabercat have been developers that have not been um, financially viable or have gotten to other investigations, and therefore those projects were on hold. And so my understanding with Silicon Sage is that they do have a receiver that's in the process of trying to get someone to complete some of the properties. Hopefully, I would love to see some construction completion on the one on Osgood near our future Irvington BART station. And then hopefully somebody will purchase or look at the project that's immediately adjacent, because that was supposed to be one of 2 resident sites. And then I think the one that most people are inquiring about, and we're working to at least fill the trenches and to make it safe, is the one that's in Centerville. They went through the process of total demolition of the site before they were in receivership. And so in the interim, at least at minimum, because there were trenches, we had fenced it off, asked the receiver to fence it off. And then we have also filled the trenches just because we didn't want people to fall into those and be a liability. Other efforts include for us that you may have heard of is Niles Gateway. And that is a project I know that was pretty, I guess in terms of it, pretty intense in terms of the discussions. That would be the nice way. Part of it is that I've been looking at that property, and many of you, I've been here 27 years. And so I know that it's been going through a period of great deal of change. And the first couple of properties proposals were over 120 units, 110 units. And then this developer originally had proposed 95 units. And with Valley Oaks, it got down to, through some discussion and through EIR and also some litigation actually from their neighbors, they are down to 75 units. And I think that when I look at the legislative policies, which I think is some reasons why I made the decision I did, is that the future that I'm looking at is going to be much more dense. And also it's going to be taking away some of the local rights in terms of determination of the characteristics of the neighborhoods. So being that this is already one project that had greatly reduced in size and also in scale, going from 3 stories to 2 stories, and working very closely with the neighborhood, I felt that it was a project that needed to happen. It's a real fine balance when you look at some of these projects. And it's not that I'm interested in just building everywhere. I'm interested in making sure that we can keep our businesses alive too. So it's a fine line, because on one hand, many people are saying we want to keep the small businesses, the charm and the local flavor. But at the same time, if we don't have anybody supporting those small businesses, we see some of those exiting. And a good discussion that I had yesterday that I would love to share, and it's something that was very fascinating. We have the League of California Cities, as I mentioned, and we had some discussions about development and economic development in addition to property and some of the land use. And after our discussion last week and looking and highlighting at some of the projects throughout other cities, we had a just informal lunch between some of the city leaderships throughout the Bay. And it was interesting for me to hear how some people felt they made the right decision, some of the lessons learned in terms of the impacts of decisions that were made. A good example is one of the cities shared how they had raised the minimum wage, and that helped in terms of the livable status for the employees, but then they lost a lot of their businesses to a surrounding city. And so therefore then, while they were able to pay better wages, they lost a lot of the characteristics because their small businesses ended up going to a neighboring city, and that impact of that. So it is important. And that's why I'm here to talk to you. I'm hoping this is not just a once a year situation, but I'm hopefully that you would welcome me back more than once a year if I'm so welcome, because there's things that are happening constantly throughout the city. And it's important for us to be able to have this conversation. So another area that I'd love to highlight, but it's not in the slides, but I can send the link to it, is that our council has had a practice now since I've been mayor. We used to have our retreats every 2 to 3 years as a city council, but since I've been mayor, we have a retreat every year. And the reason why is every year we never know what's going to happen, and we try to plan our goals as a city, and then looking at some of the deliverables and working in partnership. And I think that's also very important that we bring in staff, because I think that having a vision is one thing, but working together to deliver it is another. And so we had 4 priorities that came out of it. We had fiscal stability. We had the discussion about preserving neighborhood characteristics. And we also talked about um, COVID responsiveness, as I mentioned, with vaccines and other areas. And then finally, we also talked about homelessness. And that's another area that I think has been very much at the forefront. And when I travel throughout the Bay Area, when I travel through different cities, and I've had a chance to tour everything from Skid Row in LA, which is overwhelming with 55 blocks of homelessness, to looking at our situation here, which unfortunately has been seeing a growth because of the economic downturn and because of the impact in general of the economy on so many people's jobs and stability. I do want to highlight that there are many things that the city is doing and to clarify. And that's why tonight I'm also having a first ever for us, a budget town hall. I wanted to educate people on how the budget is being run and who has responsibilities for which areas, because sometimes it's very confusing. And last year, much like other years in the past, we've had budget meetings starting in January, and we have about 5 meetings before we adopt the budget in June. But yet we had only 500 people show up on the night of June to say that they wanted to see the budget changed, but hadn't been participating at all in understanding what roles and responsibilities. And it's important to be able to describe those. I mean, for example, a good example is many people write to us about schools, or how come you don't have more psychiatrists, or what are you doing in front of the schools for their infrastructure. If it's public works or like street and intersections, those pertain to us. That's why, as I sit on some of the committees like Alameda County Transportation Commission, we have been very active as a city, and we, as part of the Safe Routes to School, did an analysis a few years ago that covered not just 1 or 2 schools. And amazingly, in a city as big as ours with 42 schools, we actually analyzed every single school and came up with 500 action items, of which you may have seen many of those being implemented throughout the city. There are things like flashing crosswalks, painted crosswalks, and having some of those dividers that help make it safer for our students. In fact, last year, we were recognized nationally from Safe Routes to School for Vision Zero as being the national winner for youth safety, because we reduced our youth major traffic accidents and fatalities by 90% from the time period that we started in 2013 to 2018. So last year we were recognized as the national winner for that. Some of this may seem anecdotal, but it translates into real life too. A good example is during this time period, we've encouraged people to go outdoors. And one of the trends that we're seeing, and I know many people question and have asked about the safe routes or complete streets that you may see on Walnut. And how does that affect the community? Well, I will tell you that visiting all 6 or talking to all 6 of at least of all of our bicycle shops in Fremont, that their sales have gone through the roof. They have seen an increase of over 200% in many of the shops, and they are having difficult times keeping inventory. And in fact, with Bike East Bay and other associations, they're creating more awareness and lessons for people. And we are recognized as being one of the most active cities and districts, school districts, for golden sneaker and safe, walk and roll to school. And this is important for us because we want to create the infrastructure and facilities to help facilitate this. Another area that you may have heard about is we had just the other day a conversation about 2 weeks ago on Niles Canyon and the complete trail there. And we're trying to utilize that. In the past, many of you have joined me and you've walked and biked through that. And we have that annual event, a biannual event every 2 years to shut down the canyon. But one day we hope to have a trail that parallels that in some parts of it, and to give people greater access to the outdoors. Another partner that we work closely with is East Bay Regional Parks. And you may or may not be familiar that we also are working very closely with them to create the first campground in the Bay Area. And that was something that we were hoping to open last year, but it will open this fall or this summer, I think, I hope. I'm looking for Ben to see if he has any comments because he works very closely with East Bay Regional Parks too. But we hope that it opens this summer, and that will have tent camping over by Coyote the Hills, the Dumbarton Quarry. And in the future, it'll also not just have be a campground, but also have yurt camping. So I was joking, it'll be a combination of camping slash glamping that will be there, that will be available for the community. Other areas that we're working on right now in the city, we have been working to try to create more online tools. And so we just created a newsletter called Connections, and I hope that you will sign up for that. In addition to other resources that we have an age-friendly newsletter. We also have a health and human services newsletter. And we also are trying to create a lot of our tools to allow people to provide feedback. An example was earlier when I was talking about the master park plan, we also have a couple different apps that have been launched. We have a Happy Feet app, and that allows you, if you're visiting our parks and you see something that you want to note to us in terms of issue or something that you like, you can take a picture and send us a report, and it tags the location. And so that helps us to know where. Over the years, I can't tell you how often I've been stopped sometimes by people telling me things like, I want to tell you about a bush. And I'm like, it's been cut improperly. And I'm like, where is it? And they're like, it's on Mission Boulevard. And I'm like, is there any more specific details? And like, no, it's on Mission Boulevard. I'm like, well, that's pretty hard to find. So when we have these types of tools and, everything from report a concern, we have an app for that too, to allow people to provide direct contact in filing a report or concern. So it goes directly to the department. As much as I'd love for people to constantly reach out to me on Facebook Messenger or text, I'm sometimes in the middle of buying groceries and stuff and getting the milk, and I'm not always able to remember everything. And so by filling out the app, it gives a ticket and allows you to track to see the resolution of the ticket too. And so that's why I'm strongly encouraging people to utilize that. In fact, I think some people are so good at that in terms of the survey. When we did the master park plan, I found out from the consultants that we had over 2,500 respondents on the survey. And that is pretty amazing considering our city's size. And they were telling me that they were doing work in a county in Florida of over 2 million people, and they had about the equal number of respondents. So we just have a very passionate community that wants to be heard. And so we're trying to create facilities and opportunities for people to do so. But speaking of being heard, I feel that at this time I've talked for quite a bit, and I really want to hear from all of you, because I think that this is a little bit unique compared to my State of the City or other venues, is that this gives an opportunity for me to hear from you. What are some of the issues? The final thing I think I would want to make sure that Judy, if you could bring up, and this is why I was asking for some of the impact, we are also updating our residential housing needs assessment, which happens every few years, usually 8-year cycles. And so there are RENA numbers. And so we're doing affordable housing ordinance update to coordinate with that, as well as our policies on housing element. And so if you scroll through that, I apologize, you'll see that this is some of our process. We have an inclusionary housing adoption. We have some background in terms of the affordable housing fees, which help us to build those units. Because when it comes to residential housing needs assessment, we are looking at things across different categories. So a market rate, moderate, below income, and very low income. And so it allows us to build some flexibility. If you scroll down a little further, you'll see here's some of our accomplishments to date and some of the housing units that have been built. And that's how the city of Fremont will be evaluated. And you'll see that we had a RENA target of 5,455 units. And with each cycle, just to let you know, we don't get credit for carryover. So if you exceeded any of these categories or exceeded the numbers, they don't carry into the next cycle, which is 2023 and 2035. Next slide, please. So we had conducted a residential nexus and a financial feasibility study for affordable housing ordinance. Next slide, please. And so this is what they said was the maximum. They thought units could be affordable in terms of the fees. If you scroll down, so that translates into a fee per unit. Please just clarify so you don't have a heart attack right away. This is the draft ordinance in terms of what they're proposing. And then if we scroll down to the further in the presentation, we talk about the history, we talk about the nexus and analysis and what they said was feasible. But I will let you know, if you want to watch the video, there is a hearty discussion between all the council members, and it talked about the priorities. And if you scroll down, there are several different options in terms of single family homes, townhomes, stacked flat, and condos. And it's a balance between getting the fees that are necessary for us to maintain the city and the quality of life. And then yet also, I'm very conscientious of the fact the pandemic and the fact that we want to make sure that it's not something that exceeds or supersedes the ability for us to actually construct homes too. So if you could scroll down some more. So we talked about the strongest types, the types of densities, and what are the challenges, rental. And part of it, just to let you know, from the organizations that are setting these residential housing needs assessments, they're being set by ABAG, which is the Association of Bay Area Governments. And that is one of the challenges for Fremont. We traditionally have not had a seat there, and they are mostly represented by different cities and all the big cities in terms of San Francisco, San Jose, Oakland have a seat. There are 9 counties that come together, and there is quite a bit of discussion and intense feelings about these assignments. If you could scroll down further. So some of the questions we had were, do we do inclusionary unit, requiring people to build them on site, inclusionary fees, phase in of new requirements, which is something that I felt very strongly is when we look at requirements. I'm a business person in the past, and so I don't think it's fair to suddenly spring new laws without having some understanding of how it will have an impact and transition, and incentives for rental units, because we are trying to build some more affordable by design. So we're trying to think about in terms of the benefits of fees versus generation of the units, the continuation of emphasis on generation of fees, the emphasis to include some moderate. So just to let you know, one of our challenges when you look through the chart earlier, and I will be happy to reference that, you can have that for your disposal to look at and review on your own, is that we've done a great job in terms of market rate housing. We've built more than enough of our target. We have also built the most ever in our city's history of low and very low income housing. So that's why you've seen some of the projects that have gone up and that we've been creating awareness of within our city, such as we're at the Warm Springs district and throughout different parts of the town, such as senior housing. We had created the first part in our senior housing was 90 units in the Pauline Weaver senior housing, affordable housing units. We've also created units by Mid-Penn over by Stevenson. And we've also are creating Habitat for Humanity, where we use cap and trade funds. And so those are just some of the different ways that we've been addressing those. And there's a record number of low income housing coming through. But when it comes to moderate, it's also very much a struggle for us to meet those needs. So if you scroll down to a couple more slides, I think it's slide number 27, if I remember correctly. So it's not that I'm trying to skip through all this, but I wanted to take some questions. So just to let you know, the draft ordinance updating is being worked on right now by our staff for March and April. They are looking for stakeholder input, and that's why I'm making sure that you are aware of it in April-May timeframe. And so hopefully as these come up, there'll be an opportunity for you to provide some insight. And then it'll be coming before the Planning Commission in June for their review and adoption, which is an opportunity for the public also to speak. And then finally, it'll be coming to the council in July for our review, the hearing, and adoption. So that's why I think it's important that you are aware of some of these. Just to let you know, when it comes to residential housing needs assessment and the goal, originally the initial forecast I had heard from Fremont was a target for 2023 to 2035 of building 15,500 units of housing, which was like, yes, I could see some people saying, wow, that was my reaction too. And it's very difficult because there is an aggressive goal from the governor for the entire state. Through some discussions and advocacy and other such efforts, we've been able to lower it to 13,000, which is still extremely high. But I will tell you that when ours went from 15,500 to 13,000, someone else gained 2,500. So that's why I said it's one of the things that makes it a very intense discussion. But it's something that I feel very strongly about advocating, because I feel Fremont has been a leader in terms of building the housing that people have asked for. And part of this is also the jobs housing balance. They're looking at three things when it comes to factors. They're looking at transit-oriented development, which Fremont has a lot of. They're looking at jobs, and we have over 900 manufacturers, so that's a big impact. And that's something that we have a lot of jobs. And then the final thing is they're looking at the education systems and opportunities. And having firmly served on the school board for 2 terms, I'm blessed and fortunate to see that every single school and ranked some of the best in the state of California. 3 of the 5 high schools, and same with the junior high schools, ranked some of the best in the nation. So that causes a reaction in terms of the quality of life and the cost of real estate, I think, in terms of, I think many people will tell you that they want to live in Fremont for the schools, and something that I'm here to support. So with that now, I think I've covered a lot of different issues. And thank you. Any questions? That's my slide for all of you.
Great presentation.
If you guys have any questions in the chat bar, you guys can put them into the chat bar now. I don't see any questions at this time.
So Lily, would you say right now the city is, from a housing standpoint, new construction, it sounds like really high density is the way to go. Is it high density with retail, or is it just high density at this point?
So just to let you know, we have built some mixed use, and a good example is Connolly Furnitures over there. That has been a project that was supposed to be a live work unit. It's interesting for me because in this time period, because of COVID, I'm not able to really see how that works. But I will tell you that one of the things that I do, and some people would jokingly say I stalk the city. When I look at projects before they come before me, I look at it before it's approved, before I make my decision. I look at it during the process, and I often even go back afterwards to look at the usage. Another example would be Artist Walk, and I'm happy to see the mixed use, but I am not happy when I see that the storefront, which is facing the front of the street, is not being used for a storefront. It's being used to block or to have an entranceway that forces people to come into the front. We are working on, and you will see that there may have been some painted areas, and I know people love and hate this discussion, but on pop-up pilots, we did a pilot, and we are implementing it right now to see if we are able to put some more distance in terms of the safety and allow people to eat outside and to dine outside to create more of that walkable community. Because I feel that Centerville was trying to achieve some more of that when they look at some of the restaurants, and it's a balance. And some people say, why are you slowing it down? Especially some of the ones were on Walnut, we removed some of the, I guess I would say, the Hollywood stops, or people would roll. And I have seen, unfortunately, over time, you're supposed to stop, and even if it's a rolling or option for a pork chop, you're supposed to stop and look at left and right before you go. And unfortunately, the reason why we've seen this type of issue, when we talked about Vision Zero and some of the most frequent corridors for accidents, they tend to be on these corridors where we've had more speed. Paseo Padre, Fremont Boulevard, Mission Boulevard. And Mission Boulevard also right now is undergoing some construction. You may have seen some of the changes in Hayward, and that is going from San Leandro all the way down to Fremont, right where Fremont Boulevard and Stevenson and Mission Boulevard right there will be going from all the way from San Leandro down. And so we're in the process of updating some of those street medians and some of the street accessibility. Let's see. I've seen the question on trash. Trash, I think we are working with, that would be our provider. It'd be helpful if you have a situation to report that to us on our app. And I don't, Ben, could you enter the app address for me on there? I'm not able to do so right now. I don't know if you could find it on our city website. We could send that to people.
We do have a couple of other questions. If you'd like, I can read those
Sure.
to you. Okay, great. So Heidi asks, I hope I can ask these 2 questions despite they are not housing related. Fremont has one of 21 missions in California, but doesn't receive the attention of other missions. I wonder why there isn't more marketing for it. It may create good revenue for the town. There seems to be people camping in Niles Canyon. Are they legally there?
Well, one of the challenges that we have, and I would talk about camping or evictions in general, you may have seen for the first time last year, And I did speak out against this, not because I don't think it's right to have a policy. We had, as a city, been ahead of the county in adopting an eviction moratorium, but we had some criteria around it that I thought was beneficial in terms of balancing it for the landlords as well as for the community surrounding. And the county, for the first time last year, decided to override using an emergency ordinance the cities on eviction moratoriums. And that also then includes some of the discussions in terms of evicting people even from RVs and campers, because it makes it very difficult for us. Then in some of these, we have very strict policies in which we have to notice people, we have to give a certain amount of time period, we have to allow people to clean up. And then oftentimes we have already cleaned up. And I will tell you that I can send some statistics later in a separate presentation, but we have spent on homelessness an incredible amount of money in increasing every year since I've been in office. The first year I came into office, our warming shelter was only open on days where it was either below 40 degrees or inclement weather with rain. Since I've been in office, we've opened it from November through March, trying to keep people off the streets and keep them warm and safe. We also have started a mobile hygiene clinic, the Clean Start, and that rotates from different locations and allowing people to launder and also take showers and to help with hygiene, especially in this COVID period. We also put up 7 sanitation stations throughout the city and encouraging people to be able to wash and to keep themselves clean and just a hygienic resource. And then we also opened up the navigation center. And I know that you have not always heard about that. You may have seen the opening, but I am excited to share that we will be putting out a report, and it's coming on 6 months. Instead of having 45 people there, we've had 25, and we've been already able to house 13 of them. And of the people that were staying there, about 75 to 80% had part-time jobs. 3 of them had full-time jobs. And so it's been a tremendous effort to do this type of service, but we're seeing some great results. And I'm hoping to not just provide statistics, but provide some real stories that show how this translates into real life. And so another effort for us, and I think that the question has come up, is about safe parking. And so we're trying to work on those efforts. Some of the ones that I think that the question has raised about Niles Canyon, probably near Union Pacific, or also along the railroad corridor or along 880. We've seen some of them along the highway on ramps and off ramps. One of our challenges is those are not our city's property, so we cannot interfere on those. We cannot go onto Caltrans property and clean or remove things. It requires effort from partnership with Caltrans on the off ramps and on ramps, because I know some people have mentioned to me the treehouse and other things that they've seen. And then same with the Union Pacific. We are not allowed to just go onto their land. And so it requires us working with them. And we have been working with the parks and different entities and local agencies to try to address that. We have worked closely also with the school district, and there have been, for example, I know some discussions in the past with land that we have given to the city, the schools to purchase to build new schools. It was originally, it's a long story. It was originally school land that was given to the city to make parks, and the city then sold it back to the schools to make schools. But right now at this interim, they do not have a plan of funding. They have some plans, but not the funding to build it. And the upkeep, and there's been homeless that have been camped out there. And I've received numerous calls on that in the past. And we have gone out there a minimum at 4 or 5 times that I'm aware of to clean it up. But it's very hard because when people return, and it's hard because they're struggling. We're trying to provide as many resources as possible. I may not have mentioned also during this time period, I have to thank so many of our ethnic and faith-based communities and Rotaries and Kiwanis clubs who've helped us through some of the programs through USDA Farm to Family. I have been involved in giving out food, like literally, I would say literally thousands and thousands, probably over 50,000 at least boxes of food. There are 20 to 30 pound boxes of food and fresh produce and other things. And we hand them out in efforts to be able to deliver aid and help to food insecurity during this time period. But it's a true labor of love that so many people in the community have helped out with. And I'm so pleased when I see our youth, whether it's Fremont Unified or Fremont Christian or other students who are out there, scouts, all helping, because I feel that, this is not something that we can do by ourselves. Let's see, other questions.
There's one that came in from her too, and she says, thanks for the info, Mayor May. I am just curious that when I'm working with younger clients, Fremont is not their first choice, and they prefer cities which are more hip with vibrant restaurants and shopping, sort of a downtown scene. What can we do to attract these younger buyers? Thanks so much.
Sure. So this goes again to this discussion. I don't get to select the restaurants, but if all of you would like to reach out, I think that restaurants are much like any other business. They're looking for where can they turn a profit. And we've had some restaurants in the past here, but unless people actually, support them with their dollars and their wallets, they won't be able to stay. And so we need people to actually help us with that. We are trying, and I think that some areas have done a nice job in terms of bringing more restaurants. I know, like when I walk through Niles on the weekends, because they're farmers market, or Irvington at Five Corners, they've been able to bring in some of those markets and some of those restaurants. But that's something that we are also hoping. I'm also looking at, I know some people ask me about what's going on with Fry's and that location. And believe me, I'm doing as much market research, and I'm trying to secure or elicit different companies to come here, because I do know that people are looking for things to do. I have not mentioned earlier that as mentioned, I lived in Fremont for 27 years now, and I have 2 MIFs made in Fremont, and they are 24 and 20. And I do know, in hearing from them, besides hopefully hunting Pokemon, we need some other things to do in terms of restaurants or activities. And so my daughter just purchased her first home. She's working for Amazon in Seattle. But I know that that's one of the things that's, a challenge, is finding places that you can feel like you are able to relax and enjoy, especially in this COVID time period. So creating those walkable spaces. And that's where there's a struggle too, because I think that we are at a point where, historically, many people have been around long enough to see the city as it was 65 years ago, and to see how it had neighborhood charm and characteristics. And then there's the need and push from the younger generation to create a sense of vibrant downtown. But hopefully we can blend the two. And some of this is with a downtown event center and having the outdoor dining and wine and beer gardens type of effects, I think will really help bring some of the vitality to our city.
This one's from Daphne. Alameda County has a say in Fremont's things that we're working on, as there is an affordable housing unit put in the old church place between Fremont and Paseo Padre Parkway. Was it funded via our local taxes or the state?
I'm sorry, can I hear the question again? Alameda County has a say in Fremont. Well, they have a say. Alameda County itself does not have a say. It's the Association of Bay Area Governments has a say in terms of housing. In terms of affordable housing unit, I'm trying to think of the one on Fremont and Paseo Padre Parkway. I'm trying to think of the unit specifically. Ben, do you know which project that is that they're talking about? I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there is one, I think, if you're thinking of
Yeah,
Peralta.
I'm not sure either.
There's one on Peralta, but that was the church that sold its land to convert it to what used to be next to Pioneer Cemetery, if that's the one you're thinking about. Or, but basically, when it comes to projects of affordable, it comes from the property owner approaching us in terms of what they would like to build and what they're able to build. We also have requirements based off the zoning of what it is there, and so we have to comply with that. And so when it came to the senior housing, that was an effort from a developer, John Wong of Mission Peak at that time, who sold that property to build that housing. And in fact, I have to give acknowledgement to him, because he helped us fund and build the senior center there, and as part of his project. So it wasn't something that we as a community, I thought it was an amazing offer to not just build an active living senior development, but to also include the senior center, which is something that we've always wanted and needed and more of in terms of accessibility in our city. And so it's a beautiful center, and I can't wait to show it to all of you in person when it's open.
We have a few more comments that you've already addressed regarding Fry's, regarding traffic, trash. There is a comment in here that I'd like to ask from Risha. Who is in charge of installing poles, islands along the streets for the bike area? Looks like we spend most of the budget on installing poles instead of cleaning the streets and addressing traffic issues.
So just to let you know, when it comes to how things are being decided and allocated for transportation, I also sit on Alameda County Transportation Commission. And many of these programs, whether it's these complete streets or bike paths, are specific programs and grants and funding that are allocated to a specific purpose. So if they're giving us funding for complete streets or for bicycle paths, you cannot apply that to the pavement index. You have to apply it to the different programs as they're allocated. And so we have been aggressively trying to address our streets, and we have every 5 years an update, and it'll be coming again in May, where we look at capital improvement projects. And that is a document about 250 pages, and I can send you the link to that. And it's updated every 2 years, and it goes through all the city different infrastructures, and we try to analyze each piece. One of the challenges of being a city this large, 92 square miles, unlike some of the other cities that are newer or younger, like Dublin and other areas where they're just paving their streets, it's easier to maintain something that's brand new than for us to go and maintain something that's over 50 years old. And that makes it very much a challenge. When it comes to clean streets, we are also trying to keep the streets clean as much as possible. And again, if there are city streets that you feel are unclean, please do let us know through the app, because that would go directly to the Department of Public Works. I'm glad that somebody says they love what they've done at Hayward with to protect bikes in the garden medians, because that's actually what's going to be happening as we work down the Mission Boulevard, because that's happening as we come down to Fremont. It's part of the Complete Streets effort. It's for Mission Boulevard. And I can send you the link to that, and you can see the detail and breakdown. There are also one other things that you may want to note. I was the chairperson for this project, and people either like it or don't like it, but hopefully it's helping you. There was a 680 always southbound lane on carpooling, but you will see that a couple months ago, we opened up, and you may have seen during this time period, it's been sometimes a headache, I know, to see the paving, but if you look from Milpitas on 680 going north all the way up to the North Mission Boulevard, you will see that there have been tremendous work done in terms of paving, in terms of the signaling, and in adding another carpool lane. And that one will then continue. Right now, the next phase of it will continue to 680 and 84. And the reason why is that we're hoping that if we are able to facilitate people flowing smoothly on traffic on 680 going north or 680 going south, and same with 880, then people will stay on the freeway and not cut through our city. And so that is a tremendous effort. It's taken a long time, but it's something that I have driven hundreds of times just trying to see how the progress is going, and to see that it finally opened, I think last year, October 31st. So.
And I believe last question from Marisa, any plans of putting trains underground in Irvington area?
Are there any trains underground? In terms of BART, you're asking, or I'm not sure what trains. I also just wanted to let you know that I did just join the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission as a commissioner. And so that way I can be involved, because I'm very much concerned with the potential rail changes, and they're doing a rail study right now, and the impacts to Niles, Centerville, and to Ardenwood. So I'm following that very closely. But in terms of undergrounding any of the trains, I am not aware of any of this to underground any trains. Just to let you know, also, sometimes people complain or have feedback on why is Warm Springs such a huge district of houses, 5,000 units of housing. I will share real quickly that the other alternative originally that was proposed by Union Pacific was a giant corporate rail yard, which would have been 30 train lines going through there at all times and exchanging. So I think that the other alternative that we chose was probably a little bit better, because I grew up in Philadelphia, right outside 30th Street Station. And while they've done tremendous efforts now to revitalize the area, when I was going to school there in the 80s, it was not the most odoriferously pleasant place sometimes.
We have two more questions, and then I think we'll close for the day, Bill, if that's okay for you, and we'll stop right on time at noon. For number two, what are we doing to minimize train noises in Niles Canyon, Centerville neighborhoods, which has increased in the past few months? And the second question, any plans to build a high school in Warm Springs area? Okay, so real quickly with the rail, we have had quiet zones, and I can send you a link to that too. Ben, hopefully somebody's taking notes for me to all these things to send, or Judy.
But we have a quiet zone that's under construction, and it's very frustrating for us because we work in concert with Union Pacific. And because of the past history where you've seen that there were some accidents with trains derailing in Niles. So then when we put a quiet zone, because of the location and the proximity to stoplight and traffic lights, we had to then have additional infrastructure added. And the partners that we were working with at in terms of Union Pacific, they have different regulations and they changed in turnover in people. So we had a delay in terms of implementing the quiet zones. But absolutely, we are aware of people giving us the feedback on quiet zones. And the final question I wanted to answer for so many people, I did serve 2 terms on the school board, but I am not on the school board currently. And so when it comes to questions about overflow, overload, class size reduction, counselors, advisors, or any of those other types of issues, unfortunately, those are decided by the school district. And one of the rules legally for both the Planning Commission and the City Council by the state is we are not allowed to make determinations based off of school enrollment for our projects. That as long as they're within the property owner's rights and entitlement of zoning, we cannot reject projects for that reason. What we can do, which is what I did do originally when I was on the school board side, is work with the city council and with the developers, which is why you have Lila Brinkhurst Elementary, because that is the first school that was built in 25 years in concert with the effort to do so for the new residents. Any other questions? I'm sorry. But I hope that you will invite me back some other time and that it was
Absolutely,
informative.
absolutely. Mayor May. Matter of fact, you're always welcome. So we know how busy your schedule is, but we'd love to have you more than once a year. So
I would be happy to come even twice a year. And I will share, I mean, this is my, I want to thank all of you for your support. I am humbled to be able to be chosen to run and represent all of you. This is my 5th election that I won and that I term out in 2024 for the city, but I may be pursuing some other options. So we'll see. Part of it is looking at the legislative policies that you're talking about, whether it's trains, housing, schools, and other areas, because I do sit very closely and I am a nerd. So the 130 pages of housing policies, I didn't want to go through all the policies with you online because I thought I might put you all to sleep. I don't know if you have enough coffee there, because I think you need a lot to keep that discussion, but I am going to send it to you because I do seek your partnership. One of the things that's very hard, and you can ask some of my local legislators, some of them who have offices in Fremont, they used to tell me when I got on as school board member, they go, you don't have to visit us every year. I go, but you're so lucky your office is here. And they're thinking to themselves, maybe not, because I visit them regularly. But when it comes to these housing policies, what the legislators, be it assembly members, state senators, or even our council here ourselves, hear from is from you. And ideally, you take the time to follow us on some of these policies and issues and talk to us beforehand, which is why I'm doing the budget meeting tonight, is I want people to hear about it before we implement it, because we will have 5 different meetings beforehand. And to not come on the day of and say, I don't like it. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you should have probably shared it somewhere in the last 4 other meetings. So it's this, and it's also with updating our city website. We are in the process of doing so for the first time in a long time. And I'm also hoping to implement a Fremont University as part of that to let people know what exactly is the role of us versus other departments and how can we work with one another. So thanks for taking the time. Thanks for allowing me to share with you. And I look forward to meeting with all of you again in the future. And in the interim, I hope that you are able to stay well and be healthy. So thank you.
We'll definitely take you up on your offer to come a couple times a year, and we're going to make an offer to you. Real estate agents, I truly believe, have the pulse of the community. They know the pulse of the community. So, we're available to you also. If you want to outreach to us, we can pretty much give you a sense of what the community feels and thinks, because we're in contact with these folks every single day. So always feel free to outreach to us also. It's a two-way street here for you.
No, thank you. And I will attest for the people who made the comments on trash and some of the other concerns. Within our abilities, we are definitely trying to address them in public safety and other areas. But please let us know, because I am not psychic. And if you could let us know, because with 92 square miles, things are happening continually through the city. But if you're seeing a concern, please do let us know. we have to work within the confines of the law, because I know that that's one of the things that's also frustrating when I've seen some stories on the news. It's not that a lack of will from us. It's also sometimes the legalities that bind us from being able to take certain actions. So, but we can only know that if you tell us. So please partner with us and help us make the city better and help us build a better future. Thanks.
Great. Thanks again, Ben. Thanks for setting this up for us today, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Bye. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you, everyone. This ends today's meeting.